heard there's a trouble coming, but there ain't a mountain we can't move. Let hell and his friends come gunning, 'cause in the end no one can love you like I do. And the world had me bound, hanging under a cloud, but with you there's not a shadow of doubt. 'Cause after all, who could love you like I do? And after all the storms we made it through, the sky could fall and be powerless to move. 'Cause I know when I'm with you, who could love you like I do?
All right, dude. Thanks for doing this, man.
Hell yeah. Thanks for having me, bro. Good to be back.
Yeah, definitely. Last time I had you on, I think that was in 2016. How old were you in 2016?
I was a baby. I was
You're
like
a baby? Yeah.
I reckon I was probably what's that? 7 years? I'd been 20. But I think I would have I would have had a baby face for sure. I would have been an absolute child. That was when you were out in Brisbane as well. That was like a random time for sure.
Yeah.
That was great.
You were a
That was
big baby, dude, you know?
I was I was just like taking my first steps in the world. And now I'm like 27. I got facial hair. I'm like an adult now. It's crazy.
Yeah. Got the facial hair, got the hat on.
Apparently, yeah.
Man, that's cool, man. Maybe we should have you listened to that episode since or no?
The old one?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got like a pretty funny story. So the girl I'm dating now, she's gonna hate me for this. But the girl I'm dating now, she we like met once or twice just at like a mutual friends thing. And she like kind of knew about my music like loosely, and she like then like maybe the third time we were like hanging out, I was like at her place and it was in the morning and we were like just like listening to music, and then I saw her on a Spotify, like her recently listened was that podcast, like it was the Yoshino and Tim Bettinson from like 6 years ago at the time. And so I basically found out she'd like that was like her deep dive on me. She was like trying to find out like more about me and stuff, and like we all do when we meet someone, we try and like dig a little bit.
Sure.
That was it for her. She got onto the artist Decoded podcast, and apparently I passed the test, man. So apparently we must have done a good enough job proving I'm a decent human.
I guess so. She liked the 20-year-old version of you, apparently.
Dude, the 20-year-old version. It's crazy. If she can like that version, she could like anything for sure.
You're a good dude though. I mean, I've spent enough time with you. You have a good heart, man. I always I miss hanging out with you.
Yeah, me too, man. It's been how many years now? It's probably been that almost that long. 5 years or something.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. When did you leave LA?
I want to say it was probably 2018. So yeah, 5 years. Yeah, I actually just went back for the first time in a long time. And it's changed a lot, man. It's like a different place now. Yeah, like everyone's like kind of moved out as well, like that I used to know there.
What did you notice that changed?
I mean,
was the vibe? Was it
the price of everything? Of course. It just felt like I don't know. You know what it is though? Is maybe part of it is just being older and seeing it in a different lens. I think like when I was younger and I was there, it was all just so exciting, and there was like, and it's also an element, I suppose, of like when you're fresh into a project and you're like the new thing in the industry, that there's more going on for you, and then coming back as like an older guy, and having seen more stuff and like done more stuff, it just like maybe some of the excitement or some of like the hustle and bustle is like kind of, it's a little bit.
Changed.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
So
like
your
not quite
perspective of it has
the
changed, rather.
perspective. It could be, it could be more or less the same, but at least the people that I grew up with that have all kind of moved on their own different cities, and so it almost feels like that chapter of my life is like kind of closed in some sense.
That makes sense.
But it was good to be back. It was good to see good to see the old, like some of the old places I used to work out of, and it was cool.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I was gonna say, like, perhaps we should clue in the audience as to how we met. So I got hired to shoot your I guess press kit and also some images for your guys' Spotify, and also for, I think, an album or single release or something like that. And then so I flew out to Brisbane, right?
Yeah.
And then that's how we officially became friends. And I don't know why, but this specific memory, I don't know if I showed you this video, but me and you remember Ryan Kevin?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so me and Ryan Kevin, my old photo assistant, we rented like these scooter mopeds.
Oh, no way.
And we brought them to the skate park.
Bro, that's wild. I wasn't even there for that, but I remember you telling me this. This would probably be before like Lime scooters and stuff, right?
No. Not those kind. No, like not Vespas, but those kind of scooters.
But that's what I mean. It's even wilder because I'm pretty sure people weren't even riding like electric stuff around then.
Maybe not. I don't know.
So you're just pulling up to like this skate park with like mopeds.
Yeah. And then we were just doing jumps on the mopeds. Anyways, I'm sorry. That was just like the most random.
Man, Brisbane does some weird things to a guy. That's crazy.
I mean, like, to be fair, I probably would have done that somewhere else too. I
want to know like the train of thought that was going through your mind at that given moment. Like, what made that seem like the best way to spend that day?
Man, I mean, I've made so, like, in my youth, and I guess not so much in my youth because I think I was like 29 years old at that point. But I've definitely made a lot of decisions that are very quick decisions, like jumping off rooftops on skateboards, like, and that's kind of where that comes from. But I think after getting hurt enough throughout my life, I've wisened up a little bit, I think. So,
but you came out of that one fine. That was like,
I came out of that one fine. Yeah.
It's crazy. I have enough. I'm scared enough just to go into a skate park with a skateboard. But moped, that's crazy. Oh. Yeah, man. The surface is like cruel. I've done it only a couple times, but like I'm not a great skater, but I don't know. That hurts. Like landing on the concrete like that. That's not for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know this very
soft.
well. Yeah. No, you're not. You're an athlete, man. I know you. I know this.
Not that kind. I like the ones where I'm well protected by referees.
Okay. Well, But anyways, all right. So let's get into your music, man. Let's get into your creative process, man. Like how has things changed since, those times back when, I was jumping scooters in Brisbane when you were 20 years old to now?
Wow. Well, it's been a crazy ride, man. I feel like so I'm since then, that was like my first album, which you were shooting for. I've done 2 more since then, and I feel like every album I've just like learned something like really important about, I guess, even just about me or about like what I want or what I like. And there's something really like challenging about being that young and trying to figure yourself out. I feel like I never really had that space. Just because there's so much going on around me, and so many different people at that time were telling me what to do and who to do it with and how to mix it and how to whatever. So that first album was really like tumultuous for me and very like, I'm still like proud of, I guess I'm still proud of everything I've done, but each album kind of is a mark in that journey for me. And it's kind of like it's just a reminder of a lesson I learned. And so for that first one, it was really just like,
are we talking about the one in 2017?
Yeah, Revival. So that was the first record. So
okay,
that one we released through a major label, and that one, I think it was just like, it took so long. It was such a system to it. And for me, making music has always been so impulsive and so like cathartic and like necessary. And I realized really quickly and like a little too late that I hated like this whole chain of command system that is built up in that business side. Like I always, when I was a kid, I was just putting out music. I'd just come home from school and I'd write a song and I put it on Soundcloud or whatever it was back then. That was just what it was. And no one even needed to know about it. It was just that feeling for me of like, okay, this is how I'm feeling today. And whatever person who wants to stumble across it can listen to it tonight, and that's done. And then I move on.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something really weird about like having to just wait for ages.
Mm-hmm.
and having to like, like do these like videos and do these like bigger scale things that just took time, and it just got passed through so many hands, and it just wasn't, by the end of it, it just didn't even feel like me anymore. Like I was a different person. So I kind of came out of that and I was like, okay, now what I want to do is like the exact opposite. I want to like disappear to like another country just with my friends, and we're just going to make something completely like on our own with no label, with no help, nothing. And that was, now in hindsight, I realized that was kind of just the ego in me talking, because now I'm like wounded. I'm like, oh, how do all these people try and like, decide my fate for me? Now I'm going to take it back into my own hands. I can do it all myself. It was like that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
So for my second
did you
record,
have to?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, and then for your second record, did you have to pay for everything?
Yeah. I paid for it up front. We ended up signing to a distributor on the back end. So we got like a little back, but like, yeah, it was just this weird kind of overcompensation. I think, again, part of it was just me being young and like kind of, I guess like hot-headed is not the right word, because I've always been kind of calm. But I think when it comes to like, I was just emotional about it. I was just like, oh, I want to get the music industry back. I want to show them all. And this is at the same time as when like Chance the Rapper was like really like taking off independently. And I was like, wow, we can all do it. So anyway, and the lesson I learned from that second project, which is called Onwards to Zion, is just that like I actually just can't do it all myself, and it's not even that fun. Because another thing, it's interesting because all of these lessons I'm learning are things that I had when I was like 15, 16, things that what got me into music, right? And what got me into music was just making music with friends and collaborating and bouncing ideas off people. So I kind of like found myself in a spot where I was just trying to do it all myself. And the fundamental issue there is it just wasn't even fun. Like it might have been a better system, and I might have been, making stuff that I felt more in tune with, but all of the joy that came from like playing in bands in high school was like gone. And it was just kind of me in a room. And what's like the point of anything if it's not like, if you're not having a good time doing it?
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah.
So,
that was,
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, That was all I had to say for that.
Oh, okay. And what year was that? Did you release the second album?
I think it was 2018.
2018. Okay.
Maybe no, I think we recorded 2018 and released 2019. Yeah.
2019. Okay. Okay. So then let's bring it back to when you first started making music, and tell me about the feeling of that. And because it seems like, in a way, what you're saying is like you're trying to kind of replicate the feeling, maybe not the exact process, because you're going through these different processes through each album, right? And you're learning things and picking up things along the way, like whether it's from different producers or people you work with or whatever. But like, when did you first start making music, and what was the feeling of that back then?
The first time I can actually remember making my own music, I was probably like 14, and it was with my friend who lived in the same suburb as me. And you know what? I don't even remember how it actually started, because like we always had instruments in the house. I had my first drum kit when I was 4, so I was always like kind of playing stuff. And I think I was in like the concert band at school. So I was always involved. But I used to play cricket a lot. And for any Americans listening, I mean, I'm sure most people know what cricket is now.
Yeah, we know what cricket is.
It's a long game. It's baseball. It's even longer.
If anything, people have Google, so just look it up.
There you go. But anyway, I used to play a lot of cricket, and cricket used to take up my whole weekends. And then what happened was, when I was around 14, I had like a stress fracture in my back as I was like growing. So I had to stop playing cricket for like 6 months. And that was when
your spine?
Yeah, it was like something to do with like I was having my growth spurt at the time, and I was like a bowler, so like a pitcher, and I can't even remember what the problem was, but I was devastated because that was what I wanted to do for a minute. I wanted to play cricket, and then all of a sudden though, my weekends were free, right? So instead of like playing all weekend, like I have spare time. So. And this is around about the time I'm 14. I'm starting to listen to like Linkin Park, and I'm starting to listen to like, like Blink-182 and Good Charlotte and all of these like punk bands that were kind of coming up and like getting real popular, like the glory days.
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing then. The rage was like all about starting a band. That was like, that was it in high school.
Yeah. Okay.
Because, I was like kind of a dweeby kid too. So I was like, how can I like, it's so petty, but you try to find your sense of individuality in school. And for me, that was like, how can I like stand out? How can I be me? And how can I be in my own lane? And for me, that was like, okay, let's start a band. So I started out
That's
drumming.
So interesting.
Yeah.
No. It's so interesting because like I had a similar upbringing too, because I played music when I was like around that age as well, from like I don't know, 13 and in bands like 13 to like.
What did you play?
College, basically. Guitar, drums, and bass.
Oh, crazy.
But then I got into
one-man band.
Well, I'm not quite like you, but but then I got into fighting and photography almost simultaneously. But anyways, sorry, continue.
Which is, on a side note, that's such an interesting like hybrid of like things to get into at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like something that is very like peaceful and meditative. I mean, I guess they both are in some sense, but like, I guess the public would perceive like fighting to be like vicious and like intense. And then photography is just like the opposite.
Well, I think the way that I perceive photography, at least, it's photography for me in the beginning was just a decision. Like I remember talking to one of my roommates. I think I was 20, and then I was talking to him, and we had this party house in Huntington Beach, and we were just in the kitchen. We were probably hungover the next day from drinking or whatever. And I was like, dude, I think I'm going to go and like take people's headshots in Hollywood for money.
Crazy.
And then he's like, that sounds like a good idea, man. You should. He's a very like optimistic, supportive guy. And yeah, and then that was 20, and then the next year, 21, is when I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So
yeah. Photography did start out.
Do you see that?
The thumbs up.
Yeah, the stupid Mac thing.
It liked your point.
Yeah. Apparently.
It's like good on you for getting into photography, man. You did the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So photography for you, was it like did it start out as just like a way to make money almost? It was just like, oh wow, this is an opportunity to like, or like, was that already like an itch inside of you that was like, this would be like a really fun thing to do, even if it wasn't like going to make me any money?
Honestly, for me, I've always tried to follow my instincts on things and followed like the love and the passion. So I was thinking, it's like when you're in university, you're trying to like think of what you're going to do afterwards, right? And so at the time I was thinking like, because I started taking photos but without like a professional camera when I was 18. I just had like a little point and shoot that I would go around with. But yeah, I made the decision when I was 20. But I think like I was trying to think of like business ideas that would be fun to do,
Yeah.
And things that I could like pursue as a passion, but also as a career. And so that's where that came from. But it was a very naive pursuit. Again, I was 20 years old. And but I mean, that's part of the history, and I still do it. Yeah,
it's worked out great.
Yeah. So I think where it dropped off is we were talking about your beginning stages in music, and then we were talking about your first song that you released on SoundCloud, right? And so. Yeah, can you what Vapour, is that right?
Yeah, Vapour, exactly.
Okay, and then can you remind me of, or sorry for the audience, like the call dropped off, and so now we're kind of like trying to piece back together the puzzle. But anyways, okay, so you released Vapour, and then what happened?
Yeah, so Vapour's out. And Vapour was just one of those things that, like I talked about a little earlier, like I would just put a song up once it's done, right? So I would have made it in like a week, put it up, and I really didn't expect much of it. But I guess the way the internet worked back then, at least, is like if you just got picked up by like one or two blogs, then there was another website called Hype Machine, and Hype Machine basically tracked all the different blogs that were posting about you. And you could essentially like garner momentum through, they had like a chart system. So if you were getting blogged about more, you would get like higher up on the charts. And basically it was just like a snowball thing. For whatever reason, that song just like resonated with the right people at the right time. And it just started charting on Hype Machine. And
is Hype Machine kind of like a hype beast, or is that part of it, or no? Different.
I'm not. I think it's different. I'm not too sure though.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't been on a Hype Machine in a minute, to be honest. I hope it's still there.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, that's how it kind of started. So it's very out of the blue, very quick, and it kind of timed up real nice with when I was finishing high school. So that was kind of like the euphoric moment for me. It was very like, I guess it's very fortuitous. It was just like I was doing my exams, and at the same time, Vapour was taking off. And I started getting emails from like people on the business side, and I was getting interest. And that was the moment where I was like, wow, like maybe I can just segue this straight into music after I finish school. Maybe there's no gap year, there's no uni. It's just like I can start doing this now.
And then, so when did you release Winter? Because Winter came out in 2014. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So 2013 is when I graduated.
Okay.
And basically what happened is once this has started ramping up, I was put in touch with a manager whose name is Chris, who you've met, and we ended up working together for the next 8 or 9 years. But Chris at the time basically just came on like interim, and he was just like, let me help you put out more music and we'll see how it goes. And so we basically together put together Winter. So Winter was like a bunch of songs I kind of had lying around, and I took them to my friend in Brisbane, whose name was Sean. And he was like an integral part of that EP. Because I had no idea how to produce back then. So all I really had were these acoustic guitar, like sad, mopey things. And then I took him to him, and he's a great keyboardist. So he just like he just basically just transformed the songs, to be honest. And he is a really big part in creating the world that is Vancouver Sleep Clinic now. So I feel like that's something I haven't even really given enough credit to, just because I was so young, and he was like, we've been working together before on like some of my older bands, but this just felt like one of those things that it was just right. And he really he was responsible for creating that kind of ambient soundscape that was that first EP. Because as I said, for me, the songs were just like acoustic guitar and my vocal and my lyrics. But he took them from that and he made them something that was in its own kind of like realm of just like ethereal. And that's kind of where I pushed off from after that.
Yeah. Interesting. When did you start singing then? Because before you said that you used to play drums in bands, and then like when did you start experimenting with singing a falsetto?
So I started singing again, this all kind of comes down to like, I guess my ego and my drive and my ambition, because I started singing because like I realized that I was the one pushing this. And we'd been trying to get singers for the band and it just wasn't working. And I was just like, oh man, I'm so over like having to like rely on people to like come in and sing. Like I know what I want to do. Like I know what I want it to sound like, and I've always loved writing, so I know like what I want to write about. And then it just hit me one day. I was like, why can't I just try sing it? And I tell you, man, it was awful. Like the first like EP or two. Oh man, it was so bad. Like I was like you are with anything when you first start out.
Yeah.
But singing is one that's really hard to shy away from because it's like front and center. Yeah. So it took me, but this is the obsessive quality that, you and I both share that kicked in then, which was me after school. I would just like an hour and a half every day usually in the bathroom because of the reverb, but I would just be singing and playing like every day until I felt like I could get my voice on a recording.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. So that's probably around 15 right at the time. So I could sing on my band stuff. And then the funniest thing here is like voice break started getting real bad in like, like maybe grade 11, like I was 16. Yeah. So, then I couldn't sing like in my chest voice. And we have, recording sessions coming up. I was like, what am I going to do? So that's when I realized the high part of my voice. And I was like, maybe I'll just try and sing more higher up because I could kind of get into the falsetto.
Yeah.
And that was what happened. And it just kind of stuck. Like, I think I just started doing it and practicing it and strengthening it. It's just like a muscle. Like, wow. So I just started constantly singing in that higher register. The other thing is like, I just loved layers. I've always loved layers in music. And this is also something I guess I haven't really dived into much before, but like I just love to like I started off at least very much a maximalist. Like I love to keep putting things on top of each other and like blending sounds, blending drums, and especially blending vocals. So for me, I love to like record myself multiple times and, you know, put them in all different corners of the mix and like make it all choiry. And that was kind of the falsetto vocal is perfect for that because it's so thin and airy that you can almost stack it up like it's a pad or it's like a choir. So I think it was kind of like 50% like, you know, necessity and like, because, you know, of the voice break thing. And then 50% was like subconsciously, I always really wanted to do that with my voice. And you know what, a little bit is like, you know, even just talking about it now, a little bit is just insecurity because I wasn't a singer. And I was like, maybe if I stack my voice and I put lots of reverb on it, like, you know, it's going to wash it out a bit. People won't be able to tell that I'm not a great singer because it's just, you know, I can hide it.
Yeah, I understand that. But singing is kind of one of those things where I feel like you can't really hide. I mean, I'm not sure about like all the technology and everything, you know, but to be able to stack, you know, tracks and whatnot, that's kind of out of my range of understanding. But like, I mean, I've seen you perform live multiple times. I mean, I know this was a while ago, but the sound is really good. And I'm sure now it's even better. But like, I don't know. I always thought that you just had like a really good voice, I guess. I didn't realize it was something that it makes sense that you would practice it. But for me, I feel like voice is something that you either have or you don't. But it sounds like it's something that you've worked on so that you can create that muscle. Is that how you would say it, or?
Yeah, man. I mean, I appreciate that, bro. But I think like for me, it wasn't a natural thing. Definitely, the natural thing for me has always been writing. Like I always loved to write. I was writing like novels when I was like 10. I used to like always love what. Yeah, I used to love words. That's a whole other side tangent because. Yeah, I used to. That was my first dream, man, being an author. And then I left there's actually a line in one of my songs called Zion, which is a true line where I said I left my laptop out in the rain. And that is what happened with my novel. And that was before like any cloud stuff. So I just like lost it. I had like maybe 50,000 words or something.
Wow. How old were you?
I was like 12. So I used to that's what I did when I got home from school. I used to just come home and write.
Have you been, do you read a lot as well?
Yeah, I do now. And back then I used to, that's like all I did was reading and writing. I'd read a book a day in school.
Really?
Like the little books, you know, the tiny like ones.
Yeah, but still, I mean, it takes discipline to do that, you know? I mean, it takes discipline. And also like, I think, like, do you think reading comes naturally for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's interesting, like looking back on yourself. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but like I've been doing a lot more recently where I look back at all the things that I've been into. And for me, there's maybe one or two things that have come naturally. There's like something that I know, like that's just in my DNA. I can do that. And then everything else, even if I really love it, I've had to really work for. And
what are those natural things? And what are the things you really need to work for?
Well, the most natural thing, like the common denominator for me is, again, it's just writing. Because every kind of medium and even in school, in the subjects in school, even in business, like I don't know if we're talking like bios and things like that. The things that have come easiest to me is like just the writing. And then
cool.
Everything else, like, you know, and it's not necessarily always like even the funnest thing. That's the thing I've also realized. There's not always a correlation between what is natural and what you find the most enjoyable. And you see it all the time with these like amazing athletes. Like you see these guys like who are just born footballers or born like,
yeah,
and the joy isn't necessarily even, it's almost like autopilot for them. It's like not actually something that they think about and take pleasure in because they just can do it, Sometimes I feel like we get enjoyment out of these things that we actually need to put in effort to like achieve. So for me, that was actually singing, because like singing, I wasn't good at the start. And it's just this, I guess it's a natural psychological thing where it's like, if you push through something that's really hard for you and you can do it, then that's like a massive dopamine drop.
That's so interesting, because I find that with me and writing right now. I feel like writing does not come naturally for me.
You're a great writer, man. I've read the first few chapters of your new book. It's crazy. I can't wait for the whole thing.
Oh man, I can't wait for the whole thing either. I took a little bit of a pause on that because I feel like it's not quite the story that I want to tell yet. But I appreciate you saying that, and I feel like boxing is another thing that did not come naturally for me. I was incredibly afraid to spar people when I first started.
Really?
Terrified. I was terrified.
Crazy. I mean, who wouldn't be there? I guess some people wouldn't be, but
some people, I feel like some people, well, I mean, you kind of hear these stories like Mike Tyson. He says that, he was always afraid, right? But I think some people have it in them to where whether they're lying, publicly or whatever, but I think, but I don't know. I'm not those people, but I can just say to myself or say to you that, I was incredibly scared. So I understand that desire to want to get better at something that scares you. And I honestly think the most growth happens when you lean into those things that you fear, like.
So how long did it take you to train before you, I guess, even like the first time you sparred properly?
I just started sparring. I didn't even train.
The video like off the bat. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because I started basically so I started off, well, I mean, aside from like doing karate when I was a kid, I started off doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, kind of by mistake, because I went to this Kempo karate school in like when I was 21, and then they had a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class there, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then we started grappling, and I was just getting my ass kicked by everyone. But I loved it. There's something really interesting about it. And then like basically I would go to these different places. Like I would train at that Kempo karate school with jiu-jitsu, and then I'd train at Cal State Long Beach. They had a Brazilian jiu-jitsu program. And I started training there, and we would just, at the end, sometimes we would just throw gloves on and start fighting, like sparring each other, like boxing and kickboxing.
Crazy.
Without any training, just kind of brawl, which is so dumb. And we do MMA just like that too. and then I didn't start seriously taking boxing. Like I didn't start taking boxing seriously until I was actually 28.
Wow.
Yeah. So
was there a gap there, or were you constantly like doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu? Yeah.
Yeah, I was training Brazilian jiu-jitsu throughout that time. I mean, I took like a year off here and there. Basically, in total, I've done about 10 years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then I would say about 6 years of boxing, because I stopped during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But
and is sparring is it still scary?
Well, the thing is I mentally prepare before I go. I'll go into especially if I go into a new gym, like, because I was boxing in Brazil, and there's a lot of real good fighters in Brazil, in Curitiba specifically. They're known for their fighting. Like Anderson Silva comes out of there, and Shogun, and like a bunch of Vanderlei Silva, a bunch of these like professional MMA fighters come out of there. But basically, there's a lot of scenarios. So I think I prefer sparring with people that I get to know, because it's not an immediate war, but you don't always get to choose, right? So you kind of just I have to mentally prepare myself every time that I spar hard, and it is something that is scary still, but I think now I can be more composed and calm through the process,
That's amazing. I imagine it's a very similar experience to like playing live, because I think there's still like even on text before, we were talking about, like you were saying, like it's a rush, and for me, playing shows, it's still that rush, right? And you get that adrenaline, but like, there's always, I feel like people ask me all the time, like even though I've been doing this for like 10 years, like if it's still like is nerve-wracking, or it used to be terrifying, and now I'd say it's just nerve-wracking. So it's still like, it still gets the heart going, but it's definitely this trained thing where it's like, as soon as I get out there and I see the microphone, I'm like, this is something that I know, and like this is something that I can do, and I've like proven to myself I can do it. And this is, it's like, it's a weird calm. That's the best word you could use for it. It's this like sense of like inner peace. It's like, this is where I'm supposed to be right now.
That's so interesting. I would imagine, like, if we're kind of like creating this correlation between like boxing, sparring, and performing live, with being a musician, and you're the front man, so you're singing. So like, do you think that there's this odd kind of like presentness to it? Like you are required to be incredibly present at that moment. Like,
yeah. 100%. It's like you see in the movies, like, there's scenes where it's like the guy steps up to the microphone, and then all of the crowd and everything just blurs out, and the camera just like locks in on the microphone. Yeah. And it really does feel like that. They do it in boxing movies too. It's like, when it's just like they fade all the noise out, and it's like, I imagine it's that same like kind of like, I don't know, just this weird thing where the whole world just like fades out, and it just becomes this one thing. It's the breathing, or it's like, it's really, it is what it looks like in the movies. Like, they do a great job of it.
Interesting. That's so interesting. I never really thought about performing live as a musician, the presentness that requires. God, that's such an interesting thing to have to hone into. And like, I think because, our day-to-day lives, we can kind of like go about our day-to-day lives by like thinking about, the past, dwelling on the past, or thinking about the future. Like, it doesn't require, like a general day doesn't require that sort of presentness, assuming that you're not performing live that day, right? So, but that presentness is really, I mean, it's really all we have. And I know this is kind of a cliche to say now, right? But like, there is something to be said about being like that, in touch with yourself in those moments, do you, I'm curious, do you struggle at all with like having like anxiety or depression or anything? Have you ever?
I used to, I think anxiety is something that I've always been like, I've been on this weird ride with it, because I wouldn't say like I'm an anxious person, but a lot of my anxiety is sporadic, and
Yeah.
it's all self-contrived. And it's because of like, as I learn more about myself, I think it's all self-imposed like pressure. And this is like the thing that's frustrating about it for me is I know it all comes from me. Like I'm not the type of person to get worried about like, you know, exterior things. Like I've always been very like honed in and comfortable with what only I can control. But the thing is I've made what I can control, like I've put that bar so high for myself. And this is like hand in hand with my like obsessive personality. Is like I get into something and I'm like, oh, why am I already not amazing at this? Like, what am I doing wrong? Like everyone else is like getting the hang of this and like I'm not. And then it's just like this snowballing thing. So basically for me, it's always just been in waves. I'll be in this like 6 months where I'm like just chilling and I'm doing my thing and I'm experimenting with music and it's fine. And then something just flicks in me where I'm like, oh, I'm not achieving all these things I set out to achieve. I'm not, you know, I should have an album finished by now. It's not coming. I can't write. It's usually hand in hand with writer's block for me. That's when it gets bad because I'm like, wow, like I can't create. Like maybe I'll never be able to create again. Like maybe I'm a failure as an artist. Maybe I'm a failure as a human. It's just like it gets like one layer further and further. And these are the things I'm trying as I get older. I'm really trying to just moderate and just like calm because I know it's like all self-imposed. Like I know these are things like that's I guess the frustrating thing, but also the positive thing about it is like I can control it if I can just be easier on myself. And that's something I'm really trying to do is just like to just chill and just to be like, look, like what you're saying before is the essence, man. Like it's just like it's about being in the present. It's not like, you know, I can't be going back and looking at these first couple albums, but what if I did it this way? What if I did that song, produce it differently? And I can't be like, oh, I can't believe I'm, you know, what if I'm not here where I wanted to be in 5 years? What if I'm not doing this tour? It's like, I just need to be now and just like trying to make the most of like today. So that's something I really been trying to work on a lot.
Yeah. No, I get that. Man. It's difficult, right? I think it's difficult to remind yourself of that because there's so much external stimuli. And I feel like a majority of us that have smartphones, for instance, are aware of these external stimuli. And it could be as simple as just like watching YouTube videos or something like that, or having too many options on Netflix to watch, or I think it has to do with the ability, and obviously I'm no neuroscientist, but I think that it has to do with something with where our nervous system is getting overwhelmed constantly. And to kind of make a correlation between boxing and what we're talking about, what I realize about people that first start sparring, a majority of people, not everyone, but they have not trained their nervous system to intake that there's these things, punches coming at you, right? And they could be super light, but there's a lot of them coming, right? And so what happens is you essentially have these tools when you're experienced to train your brain to know what to do in those situations so that your nervous system doesn't get overwhelmed, right? And so if I'm trying to correlate this with just everyday life, I think that our nervous systems are constantly getting overwhelmed by we're overly stimulated, you know? And I think that we are such sensitive creatures with like the powers of gods in our hands. And I can only imagine how much more difficult it's going to be when we have a chip in our brain. You know what I mean?
We're going there.
I mean, it's happening. You know, Neuralink has already started. Human trials, right? So, you know, that is our future. And I've been not everyone's, but
I've been thinking a lot about screens lately. Like, I guess it's the new Apple, like the what do they call them? Like the eye goggles or whatever.
Oh, okay.
I'm starting, seeing people walk around with those, and it's just like, man, it's even, like this, the amount of screens, like even in my apartment right now, like I'm looking at my laptop, and if I look right, I have my TV there, my phone's like right next to me, and then like, you know, I'll be watching TV and I have my laptop and my phone open. It's just like a and you know, these new headsets, it's just like, it's just everywhere you look, any direction, there's screens. And I think what you're saying about the overstimulation is like so real. Yeah. And it's a big problem, at least for me. It's something that I'm like, and I'm sure for most people, but I know it's something I need to get on top of. Because even when it comes to attention span, like it just like, it's so bad. Like even just trying to sit through a full YouTube video now, you know, these things are just like things that are so rapidly deteriorating. Like it's not even a gradual process. It's like I've gone from, you know, sitting down and watching like full movies all the time to just being like, I can't even watch a minute of a video.
That's so interesting. I find that too. And that's why I like going to the theater a lot. Because, you know, it's like you're going to miss it if you leave the theater, right? Yeah. Which is kind of funny because when I was in Argentina and when I was in Buenos Aires, I went to see what that new Scorsese film, Killing of the
Flower Moon. So something like that.
Yeah. And no, I gotta look this up. I gotta Killing Killing of the
Flower Moon.
No, you're right. Killing of the Flower Moon. Yes. And I remember I went to see it. It's 3.5 hours long, and like it was so good, but I had to pee so bad. I was just like,
oh no!
I was just like, please end. No. It was just like too much. But anyways, that's like a whole nother thing. But I do. Sorry, I do know what you mean about the attention span, man. Because you know, I notice with myself that if I'm watching, I started watching this TV show Shogun on Hulu, and like I'll watch it and then I'll pause and then like look at my phone and then and I feel like for me, like I feel like I'm a pretty disciplined person, but these devices, they're made to hijack your what's it called? Hijack your brain essentially, right? To be able to pay attention to those things, right? So
that's the craziest part, man. Like someone like you, I've like known you for a long time, and I know how like disciplined you are. And even for me, like I know the standards I put on myself, like, and these things can still just like easily.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? Sorry, it kind of cut out.
That's okay. I was just gonna say, like I've known you for a long time, and I know like how like disciplined and like regimented you are with like what you're passionate about. And even for me, like the standards I hold myself to, like it's crazy that these things can just come in and like without us even being aware, like you say, hijacks just like the best word for it. Because it's like even on, you know, even with this kind of discipline that we have in other things, we just drop the ball when it comes to like the devices and the stimulation without even realizing. Like, you know, it's just all of a sudden I do the same thing. I pause a TV show halfway in, not even a quarter in. And I'm like looking at my phone. I'm like, what am I doing? Like I'm watching a show. Like, why am I like checking my Instagram feed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
You know, actually for a long time, I stopped separated the devices. So I had an old phone where I had Instagram on it, and that would just be the stupid thumbs up thing.
Another good point.
So I know I had an old phone that I would just, God damn it. No, I got to just keep my hands to myself. That's going to sound weird if someone just listened to the audio. Okay. So I would have an old phone where I would just have it's connected to Wi-Fi, and it would have Instagram on it. And then on my regular phone that I would carry around with me, I would not have any social media on it.
That's smart.
But recently, I put Instagram back on my phone because I don't carry two phones around anymore. And yeah, I don't know, man. It's not a great thing. It's not a great thing, but I don't know.
It can be. That's the thing that's annoying about it, isn't it?
Yeah. But anyways, like, let's see. I do want to talk about. I do want to kind of switch gears and talk about just like your creative process now as it has changed before. So we were talking about earlier. Basically, we talked about like the first EP and kind of your beginning stages of music, and then your second album and your first album, your second album.
Yeah.
And then so kind of where are you now with your approach to like your creativity, your music, and everything. And we were also saying that you got out of a kind of out of a creative funk, right? How were you able to get out of that?
So basically, to like sum up all of the mishmash that I've kind of like scattered over the podcast, like I think the lessons that I've learned from everything, from the first project, second project, the third one, thing like is I basically kind of reached this like point in my life now where I've given myself space to process like everything that happened to me. That's the first thing that was essential, because the Vancouver Sleep Clinic thing has very much been a runaway train for me, in the sense that it was more just like we talked about the timing of the EP and like how it came out. It started like lifting off right as I finished school, right? So I had no real chance to just be a normal 18-year-old with time and space to figure out who they wanted to be. I was just that. And not only that, but I was like writing about it as a living. So there's this kind of this thing where I was just like brought into the whirlwind. And the biggest thing for me has been the last even 2 years is just to decompress all of it and to unpack it and realize like these things. Because for me, the essence of why I make music has always been held in that first EP. All of the core foundational beliefs I have and the things that I love about music can be found in how that was made, because it was made as like at times like a solo, like cathartic, instant expression of things I was going through, being released like in real time to people that I cared about. And then also it was made in collaboration with people that I loved. And these two things are the things that have been lost at various different times over my last few albums. And it's just because like, I think it's just, I've just overcomplicated things, or I've just like tried to do things in a way that just isn't me because I see other people doing them. And it's all of these self-imposed like pressures and anxieties that are driving the releases. It's not because I haven't been giving myself that space and that time to sort of tap into what the root of it is for me. And so the last couple of years have been amazing because it started, I guess, out of compulsion, like with the pandemic, but then it kind of just carried on. I'm like, okay, now I'm enjoying just like living a little and experiencing the world around me. and try not to be so hell bent on like where I'm going to be next year and what the next thing is and when the next album is going to be finished. And that's for someone like me who's obsessive and often at times addicted to like working. It's been really hard to like learn, but it's put me now in a place where creating is actually just fun again. And it's something that some days, if I don't feel like doing it, I just don't do it. And even that might sound like nothing to some people, like so easy. But for me, that's really hard because for the longest time, I would just torment myself all day long. If I'm in a writer's block and I almost treat it like as a demon on my shoulder, being like, oh, that's okay, Tim. You can just like chill out today. You can just like go walk in the park. And I'd be like, no, like get away from me, Satan. Like this is my job.
Yeah.
Do you know? And it's just like, it's a crazy line of thinking because you just can't force like creativity like that.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's really where I've been the last year. I've been in that really sweet place of just tapping back into making music when I feel like it, when I feel like I need to express something, and then with people I love, just keeping it in a circle of collaboration of people that I really feel like in tune with.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I mean, thank you for sharing that, man. Like, thank you for sharing. I'm sure a lot of people will get something out of that. I mean, I myself get something out of that too, because the only thing that I would honestly say that gives me any sort of anxiety is the creative process. I'm very hard. I can be very hard on myself with that. And sometimes the athletic stuff is a bit of a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
For my inability to create or my self-doubt or, you know, all of those things, you know? So
do you have creative doubt a lot?
Sometimes it depends.
I'm curious for someone like you as well, because you travel a lot, and I imagine you spend a lot of time like writing or creating on your own. And
yeah,
I'm curious if you're the sort of person who has that kind of like mental fortitude where that's like something that you harness because for me that's hard. I really start to doubt myself when I spend like lots of time on my own. So I'm curious how you find that.
It really depends. It goes in waves, man. It goes in waves, you know? Like I feel like when we spoke last time in October of last year, when I was in Patagonia, I was literally locked away in a cabin. The only person I would really see, well, I got introduced to some people, but it's also difficult because like my Spanish at the time wasn't as good. Not that it's great now, but I'm at least conversational somewhat. But I wouldn't see that many people. But at the same time, there was something so freeing about that. And it was also just like, I think something about my mindset at that particular time. I think you know what it was, is because I was really, really, really honed in and focused on writing the book. And that occupied my time and I was obsessed with it. And I think when I get obsessed with those projects and things, I'm so present in that I kind of tune everything out, which is good and bad, I think, because I'm sorry, what?
Sorry, you keep going.
Well, I was just going to say that I'm also not a person that advocates for isolating oneself socially. Like, I don't think that's a good thing, you know? Yeah. And so actually, when I talked to you on the phone, that was a very good thing for me. I mean, we had a great conversation, and I mean, it was kind of like we just picked up where we left off, you know, like it reminded me of the, it like, so to kind of, how do I say it? To get the social sort of dopamine hit, like I would call friends sometimes and stuff, Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you find like, though you say you get like locked in, like tunnel vision on a project, which I actually get as well. Like I know the feeling, it's awesome when you just like, or you just fixated on this thing and you kind of like everything else is peripheral. But like, even for me, there's like days, like sometimes I'll go weeks like that. And then there's a day where I wake up and maybe it's just the wrong side of the bed thing, but I'll just be like, what am I doing? Like, what is this? This is awful. It's all like, it's lies, right? But it's just like this thing that just comes every now and then for me. I'm like, what am I doing? These songs suck. Like, do you ever have moments like that with like your book or something?
Dude, I had that today.
Really? Crazy.
I called one of my friends, one of my buddies, one of my really good friends, and actually he's a producer and he loves your music.
That's so sweet.
He fucking loves your music.
Hell yeah.
I was hanging out. I mean, like, I've known him for so long, and he listens to your music for long, like 10 years since you've been producing.
That's crazy.
Music.
That's crazy.
But anyways, I called him, and just kind of like voicing my doubts and stuff, because I'm I consider myself an only child, even though I have a half brother and a half sister. So I internalize a lot of my issues. What helps is for me, and like I've told other people this, as a sort of self-therapy, is I write, I journal. I have a journal, and I'll write just like the most whatever I'm going through, and I try to be as honest as possible of what that fear is or whatever, and see it on the page, so that when I come back 3 months, 6 months, a year later, I look at it and I realize that was a feeling that I had at the time, and it's not something that controls me. But at the time, I allow those lies, those demons, right, to control the way that I feel about myself and things, right? So I'm curious, is it similar for you, or like what? Like, how do you deal with those negative thoughts?
It's so hard, because this is the thing I've always found really hard to balance. It's like, I mean, it's a matter of discernment between a gut instinct and then a lie. Because sometimes I feel like there's sometimes there's just a gut feeling, and we're talking like project specific stuff here. So like, I'm not talking about the demon that says, Tim, you'll never make it as a musician. You're a terrible singer. You're a terrible writer. Because I know I've got enough runs on the board now for me to be like, that's not true. I can do it. But sometimes I'll be working on a specific project, and that's when it's tricky, especially for me when I'm by myself, when there's no one to bounce off, because sometimes I have this feeling and I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is it. And that for me is, and I imagine for a lot of people, it's so hard to discern if that is an authentic gut feeling or if that is just your mind trying to shut something good down before it eventuates. It's almost like trying to protect you because you might be doing something edgier or something that's like new territory for you creatively, and your mind's like, nah, this isn't it. It's scary. We don't want to go here. And that's why for me, it's become important again to bring people into the process at certain stages, because I know the way my mind works and it can just spiral and shut these things down before it could actually be a good idea. Sometimes, and I like to make things that like are scary for me. I like to sort of push myself. So it's become really essential to me having people that I trust around. And vice versa. Sometimes I could make something that's like, I think's really good, and then they could just be like, look, I don't know, this isn't it. And you can get carried away in both senses. So it's become important to have those people to really help me like discern between those voices.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you hear a lot about like Stephen King, for instance. I know the person that reads all of his stuff is his wife, right? So it's kind
Really?
of like, yeah. So I think for him, his wife is a writer as well.
Yeah.
That his wife is like that kind of voice of reason for him, you know? And I think that, you know, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, because you have had that experience with working with a major label, to where like people just tell you, like, do you think that there's sometimes people like in that situation, perhaps people that you might not trust or you don't know very well, they just tell you what you want to hear as opposed to telling you what you need to hear?
100%.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that I've learned has happened to me. And it really has a lot to do, like it really took a lot out of my confidence in myself and my creative decisions, because I would have people say things that just like in both directions. Something's really good, something isn't good, and it's not based on what the art actually is. It's based on whatever business or personal incentives that they might have. And
yeah,
that really, for me as a young guy, like I hadn't formulated like my own sense of like creative being yet. I hadn't even figured out what that was. That really took a toll. And this has been a big thing again in the last 2 years for me to unpack, is like, it's almost like learning to be confident first in what I'm doing. And then the second step is to bring other people in. But the key for me is to first be sure, or to first like at least stand behind something or an idea and just be like, this is something that I think is good. And at that point, it's great getting feedback, but it's not feedback that's going to cripple you or like send you back into the shadow realm of like, I'm a failure as an artist. Like, what am I doing with my life? It's like, wait, this guy's opinion just might actually be different from mine. It's fine. And that's something it took me a long time to develop that sense of, yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate your candidness about this. I mean, I think like us as outside observers of people, let's say it's like a teen celebrity, or, you know, someone that's really young that gets very famous, or just someone that just gets famous in general, right? And like, you don't understand from an outsider's perspective all the things this person goes through, all of these trials and tribulations, right? And I think it's easy for us as outside observers to judge the actions of people, right? And deem them as crazy or whatever. But it's hard to gain perspective when you're constantly told lies, when you're impressionable, and when you don't have a sense of self. And it comes from a sense of understanding and knowing yourself, right?
100%. Yeah, it's like it's weird, isn't it? Because it's one of those things that, you know, I feel very insanely lucky to have been, you know, that segue from school to music is like, I feel so lucky to have had that and to not have to, you know, wrestle it out with like part-time jobs and like that side of the grind. Yeah. So I feel very blessed in that sense. But it's the grass is always greener thing, because there's some days I wake up and I see some of my friends who had all of those years to like just like figure themselves out and reach this point where now they have, 9 to 5 stable careers. Some of them have families. And, you look at that sometimes and it's hard not to be like, wow, that just looks like so simple and beautiful. And, it's, and then they look at us and they're like, wow, like, wouldn't it be cool to like, travel and like do all of these like random things on any given day?
Yeah.
But it's just this, everyone's trying to figure it out. The grass is always greener. That's the thing I'm learning. Like,
yeah,
I just have to like own my story so far and like where it's brought me to, and then just like harness it and channel it into what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have those same thoughts. I mean, it's interesting to talk about this too, because we're 10 years apart, and like, I have definitely seen that within, people that I went to university with, or, friends growing up or what have you, that have stable careers, 9 to 5 jobs, constantly getting paychecks, have a family, blah, blah, blah. Right. And like, and there are seeds of doubt, along the path. And I think it doesn't just go for people that are in the creative fields. I think it can happen for anyone. I mean, even people that have 9 to 5 jobs, right? I think it's kind of like, what am I doing for my life? Working for this tech company, giving like 80 hours a week to the, like there's that too, right? So it's like, I guess, what questions are we left with being you and I as full-time creatives, right? I don't know, what questions do you have for yourself, like in those situations? I'm curious, because I know what questions I have for myself, but I'm curious what your questions are,
Well, I think, I mean, the biggest, like, it all comes down to purpose for me. I mean, like it does for most people. And it comes down to like, I guess there's two things. It's purpose, and then it comes down to like your innate, like, God-given abilities. And like we talked about earlier, there's some things that, you just can do, right? And these things, a lot of the time when I, like, for example, when I step away, when I'm really having a rough time and I step away from music or writing for like a couple weeks, these things always just like itch at you. Like, that's how you know what they are, because, and I'm sure it's the same as thing for you when it comes to like photography or like fighting or whatever it is, like that is most natural to you. You step away for like a few weeks, you might hate it. There's times where I've hated music. I'm like, what am I doing? I need to just like not ever pick up a guitar again. And then 3 weeks later, after like playing FIFA or being on a beach or whatever it is I'm doing, wasting time, there's this thing that's inside of me. It's like, I need to like get my voice memo out and just put this melody down. And that's how it all starts again. So that's like the first thing for me that I guess assures me when I have these like questions about, like what I'm here to do. Like, what am I here on earth to do? That's always been the answer, is just like time and space. And then just see what comes itching at you. See what and it's always the same thing. That's what I've found. The second thing comes down to purpose. And for me, that is on a spiritual level. That's like, in my faith as a Christian. And that's something, even just like last night, I was like listening to this podcast called The Rise and Fall of Mars Church Hill. I think that's what it's called. Mars Hill Church. But it's basically about this pastor who was just like this real, he ended up running like one of the biggest churches in America called Mars Hill. And he just like, it always happens with these things where it starts out small and it starts out a lot of the time with the right intention. And then it just becomes this like powerful beast, and you just lose sense of what it is. And for him, it started just becoming about numbers, and it started becoming about like how many people. It became about social media and marketing and how many people can we bring in, and the actual essence of the church and of what he wanted to start when he started in his living room is just gone. And for me, that was definitely starting to happen. Like when it came to my music, as it started getting passed through more hands, as it started reaching more people, these seeds that I had planted like in winter and in the early music, like they just started to, I didn't even know what they were anymore, because it's just become bigger than me, and my ego has become inflated, and my standards have become higher, and everything's just like blown out of proportion. And that's the biggest thing that's like come out of the last couple of years above everything else, is just looking back at it all and being like, why did I start making music? Like, what is it in me that, and it has to do with the natural thing, and it has to just do with the message that I want to share with people and what I want to give to the world. And ultimately what I want to give to the world is like hope. And that for me is just, it just got clouded with all of these other things. I was making these songs that I didn't even care about, writing about things that weren't even like aligned with that vision. It was just because I thought it would be like a cool thing. So coming back to that has been the most important thing for me over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, man. Seriously.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate your insights and your candidness, and you've grown so much as a person. You know, I've never had. Well, I wouldn't say I never had these sort of conversations with you, but I think when we used to hang out before, it was just kind of fun, and we'd play pool and kind of.
Dude, you were riding mopeds and skate parks.
Yeah, I love that.
It was a different time.
It was a different time riding mopeds, skate parks, you know. But so I'm curious, like, do you ever go back and listen to those first songs, like Winter and your EP Winter? Like, do you go back to remind yourself, or like what's your perspective on that?
Not like regularly, but I did actually maybe 6 months ago. Like I did a listen through. But that was the first time in a long time. And that's interesting because you can really, I feel like it's almost something I've been running from for a long time, you know. It was almost scary to like go back and be like, because it's almost like deep down I knew how far away I'd gone from that, at least in my mind. Like it's not like I've put out things that I'm like ashamed of just to clear the air. Like I'm still proud of everything, but just because I knew where I was at the time, and I knew where I am now, and I was just scared to like listen back and be like, wow, these are two different people. And that, you know, that's essential for me, just to realign. And even just listening to it, being like, wow, I remember making that with Sean. And I remember like just all, you know, I remember, you know, my mom dropping me off after school to the studio to record that, and like busking on the weekends so I could like make enough money to do it. And I remember like playing it for my school friends at the time and just being so happy about it. And just all these little, it's just perspective, isn't it? All of these little things that music encompasses is really what I wanted. I just want to be a child again, which is the crazy thing. You get older and I just want to be that child. Like I want to just be that carefree and that unfazed. It wasn't about making money or career or anything. It's just about doing the thing that feels right. That's what it comes down to as a child.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I understand that so much. And I've talked a lot about kids on this podcast. Not that I have any of my own, but, I love. So for instance, when I was back in California and for the holidays, I went over to visit one of my friends in Sacramento, and I went over to his house, and he has 3 kids. And the crazy thing is I met him from the podcast. Like, he was a listener on the podcast, and he actually guest hosted one time. And
really,
yeah.
That's
So
cool.
So random, but and he has this little 3-year-old daughter that was just such an amazing energy. She was just like this, just like incredible ball of energy, and she kind of came out of nowhere. I was like, whoa, like she started crawling on me and stuff, and I was like looking at him, and I was like, hey, is this okay? This is kind of, is this like, she was just like unhinged,
Yeah.
And then I was just like, man, kids are so amazing, and like they contain so much pure, beautiful, wonderful energy. And I think along the way, potentially we can forget that, or jaded from, other people's wants and desires, and in turn, they, through osmosis of like living in Los Angeles or something, for instance, we both live there, and we're driven to accomplish something there, right? Like those desires become our own, and it's about our ego and stuff. But really, like, the thing that gets us into creating is just wanting to create the thing, right? And
yeah,
it's like, one of my friends said this on the podcast. His name's Wesley Stringer. He said, sometimes just being able to create something beautiful is good enough.
It's a crazy statement.
Yeah. And I was just like, damn, yeah, that's so right. I think we just get lost in this accomplishment bubble of, and sometimes rightfully so, because, we want to make money off of it and whatnot, but
that's like the complication, isn't it? Like when you're trying to make it a career and trying to provide for, one day for your family, perhaps, or whatever it is. It's like, there's other people there that's like dependent on you. Or, it's like, it's hard because it's a balancing act trying to like, because the reality is like, you're not a child anymore. You don't have people just like paying for everything you do and like holding your hand through everything. So there's an element there where it's like, you actually need to do all that stuff yourself. But then at the same time, how do we harness that part of us that is just like that intuitive and instinctive with creating?
Yeah. Who okay, by the way, are you okay on time, by the way?
Yeah, I'm chilling.
Okay, cool. All right. So who are some of the people that you think of that are artists, or they don't necessarily need to be artists, but people that you can think of that like that you've encountered in your life, or you've heard interviews with, or that kind of come to mind that you feel like have harnessed that sort of childlike energy, but also have created a career out of whatever they do? I mean, it could be like even someone's perspective in terms of they're a janitor or a librarian, and they have this beautiful energy to them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, not on a personal level, obviously, but like Rick Rubin's always been a big inspiration for me.
Totally.
Just
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for the longest time. Like, I think that guy's just such a breath of fresh air when it comes to like, especially coming out of like the LA machine and just all the producers, and it's just about quantity and, you know, and he's just so anti like the structure of songs and the way that recordings and albums are made. It just changes all the time based on the artist for him. And I don't know, there's something about the way he looks at it and talks about it that is really inspiring to me. That's what I aspire to be like as I get older, especially. Yeah, because I think it's just like we've made it so formulaic now and so like efficient. It feels sometimes like in LA, especially, it feels like a factory line, like when you're making songs.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I do a deep dive on Rick Rubin's stuff, and I see like some of the records he's made and like the way they did it. And like, you know, sometimes these guys like, you know, they rock up to like the studio and they won't even start making music for like a week. He's just like, I know like this is studio time, but like we're going to do all this other random stuff first. And then you're going to figure out what you want to write about. Like, I love that. It's just like, it goes against the grain of what we say we have to do in society now, which is to make things constantly and quickly.
Yeah, totally.
And he's just like, no, let's just chill out for a week. We'll get there. It's like, it's the Australian way, man. You can't not love it. You know, we'll get there one way or another at some time or another.
I love that, man. Yeah, I guess it goes back to the forcing creativity kind of thing, you know? Like, you know, something I find interesting is if you go back and listen to some of those Bob Dylan interviews, especially like as he's gotten older, he's like, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but he says something to the effect like, I can't create those songs anymore. You know, he was just tapped into like, you know, whatever it could be, God, it could be, you know, whatever you want to call it. You know, the Greeks would call the Greeks and the Romans would call it the daemon. It's like this, the highest version of oneself, the highest version of spirit. And I think like, if anything, to me, that is magic. Like being able to be so tapped into one's own process and to have that confidence to be able to like, yeah, be like, we'll get there. I mean, I know that's kind of, they're two different things, the Bob Dylan thing and the Rick Rubin thing, but I guess, you know, someone that stands out to me is like David Lynch. And I don't always like David Lynch's stuff, but the fact that he exists and like he is so strangely himself, and like I love that. I love people that are just strangely themselves, you know?
Yep.
Like, there's something inspiring about that instead of, you know, because there's like an absolute confidence in that. Maybe it's naivety, maybe it's, you know, some people would call it stupidity, but there's something beautiful about that confidence.
You need a little bit of all of that, I reckon. You need the naivety and the stupidity and all of it.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Well, damn, man. Gosh, I feel like we've talked about a lot of really great things, man.
We went through some stuff.
Dude, seriously. No, I appreciate you so much for doing this conversation, for being so candid. I hope,
of course, man.
Yeah, and I'd really love to continue to keep in touch and just like continue to remind each other to just allow ourselves to let go in times of struggle, you know?
Man, 100%. And like, I feel like it's one of those things where it's like you mentioned before, like when you're in, like we both just get in the zone sometimes. And it's like, sometimes you just have that call, that interaction that just inspires you. And it just keeps you like going. And even like the last time we talked on the phone, that was like, for me, sometimes that's all I need in a week, you know?
Me too.
Just to talk, you know, you talk with another creative person or just a friend and you're just like, you know, that's all it takes sometimes and that's the lesson I've like learned in the last couple of years. It's just like, you can't just be in that bubble. You have to just like open yourself. To like, you know, so anyway, that's what our relationship's always been for me, man. It's always been super inspiring. And like, even though we're in different parts of the world, like all the time, like it's cool that we can both like simultaneously be like, you know, pushing forward together in our adventures. And I'm sure we'll link up again soon, man. I'm sure we'll be in the right place at the right time.
I know, man. I'll have to come out there, or I'm sure it'll
it'll happen.
No, our paths will align again. I'm more than positive about that, man. I mean, our paths are aligned, but I mean, like in
physically,
yeah. You know, I think I appreciate you for saying those things, man. Like, you don't know how much like you made my day. I was actually having a pretty shitty day. I think part of it is like I train really hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can't sleep because I have a lot of creative thoughts, and I don't know. I just think a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And today, like, I was really, really looking forward to speaking with you. I didn't realize we would go this deep, but I am incredibly grateful for having this conversation. This is
me too, man.
Like, yeah, like this is beautiful. It's beautiful.
I couldn't agree more, bro. Feel very honored and stoked to be on the podcast again, man. And let's stay in touch for sure. And let me know when that book's dropping as well, bro. Can't wait. Hopefully when it's ready, it's ready, you know, when the time's right.
Yeah. Well, I think you've helped inspire me a bit, because I've been piecing things together again for it. And, you know, it's just like kind of the thing. It's like you're trying to force things to happen, right?
Yeah.
But you kind of like have to go back to the drawing board and figure out like what is the heart of the project, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like I think sometimes you just, for me, it's like I felt like I convoluted things by trying to do things quickly or whatever. And but there is a soul to it, right? And I'm sure you can say the same thing for your music and other creative things, right?
100%. Yeah.
Well, cool, man.
Cool, nice one, bro.
All right. Thanks so much, dude. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Until next time, brother.
Definitely. All right, man. Take care.
Peace.